Hi.
Greetings. We're on page 84 of Crisis of Conscience. Ray has just recorded the remarks of Fred Franz at that famous Gilead address, where he takes up the idea that because he and Nathan Knorr and the famous Watchtower lawyer Hayden Covington were the only ones invited by Rutherford into the presence of JFR before he died on December the 7th, 1941, the day of Pearl Harbor. Somehow that was the passing of the Elijah authority to the Elisha class. So giving himself and Hayden Covington and Nathan Knorr prophetic significance somehow. He takes that up again here. When the governing body discussed the proposed reorganization, the vice president made direct reference to this assignment from the dying Judge Rutherford. I have no doubt that Fred Franz felt that a certain mentalizing had occurred at that time. As has been stated, Nathan Knorr succeeded Rutherford to the presidency. Hayden Covington, the big Texas lawyer who defended Jehovah's Witnesses in many cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, was asked by Knorr to become vice president, this despite the fact that Covington made no profession then of being of the anointed class. This shows that neither Judge Rutherford nor, initially, Nathan Knorr felt that being of the anointed was essential for directing the work worldwide. Covington's own testimony given during the Walsh case in Scotland indicates that it was not until some correspondence came, a couple of years later, asking how this could be, that he and Knorr talked about his not being of the anointed, and Covington decided he should resign. Relations between the two deteriorated as time went on. Covington eventually left the headquarters staff to go into private practice. Fred Franz was elected as vice president following Covington's resignation in 1944. I don't think too many people know about that.
Yeah, but I do think that tells you that I think it's more a case of delusion than just trying to be top of an organization. Otherwise, this controversy about whether or not he's of the anointed would easily be resolved if you have no conscience at all. I think there's conscience with these men. I just think they're a bit deluded.
This is your part.
Okay. Though the three heirs of Rutherford's deathbed transference of responsibility, which incidentally shows there was no governing body in operation, had now become two, there was evidently still a definite feeling that a role in fulfilling prophecy was in effect. In 1978, at the large convention in Cincinnati, Ohio, when Fred Franz, now the Society's president, was asked to speak to the audience of over 30,000 persons about his life experience as a witness, he chose to spend the bulk of the time discussing his relationship with the now deceased Nathan Knorr, particularly emphasizing Judge Rutherford's dying words to them. It can very truthfully be said that the talk took on the aspect of a eulogy, as Fred Franz described Knorr's qualities and stressed that he had stuck by Nathan Knorr right to the end, just as the judge had urged, and that he was proud of having done so. Perhaps even more illuminating as regards this view of being mantalized was an expression made that same year during a session of what was now the writing committee of the governing body. Present were Lyman Swingle, Ewart Chitty, Lloyd Barry, Fred Franz, and myself. A commentary on the letter of James was being written by Ed Dunlap, and Fred Franz had asked for an adjustment on Dunlap's discussion of James chapter 3, verse 1, where the disciple says, Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, knowing that we shall receive heavier judgment.
The material Dunlap had prepared said that this evidently was a warning against unqualified individuals seeking to serve as teachers, simply because of a desire for prominence. Fred Franz asked for the elimination of most of the material, but gave no particular explanation for his objections except to ask in writing, quote, "If Jesus gave some to be teachers, how many was he to give? And since Jesus does the giving, how could James tell the men, not many of you should become teachers? How did James himself become a teacher?" Ray comments on that. Since I had been assigned to oversee the project of the commentary's development, at the committee hearing, I asked Fred Franz to clarify his objection and tell us just what he thought was meant by this text. He stated that he believed it meant that it was God's will that there be just a few men in the entire Christian congregation who could rightly be called teachers. I inquired who such would be in our time. Speaking very calmly, his reply was, quote, "Well, I believe that I am. I have been here at headquarters for over 50 years and have been involved in the field of writing and research during most of that time, so I believe that I am. And there are some other brothers throughout the earth who are." End of quote.
This response was another occasion when the effect was so startling that the words were in effect burned into my memory. I was not the only witness to them, since they were spoken before the other 3 members of the writing committee. By his remark, we had identified for us only one teacher on earth by name, Fred Franz. Who the others were, we were left to speculate. As I told Lyman Swingle on more than one occasion thereafter, I regretted not having pursued the matter further by asking for the names of the other teachers of our time, but the response left me momentarily speechless. I bet. No. In the same material in which he presented his objection to Dunlap's material, President Franz had also suggested the addition of the following points in the forthcoming commentary, quoting now from page 2 of his write-up. Now, James himself became a teacher. We do not know except that his half-brother, Jesus Christ, appeared to him after his resurrection. Not every dedicated baptized Christian man who may want to become a teacher does so out of selfish, ambitious motive. Such a rightly motivated teacher was seen in the case of the 27-year-old editor and publisher of the magazine Zion's Watchtower and Herald of Christ's Presence in July 1879, Pastor Russell. Well, I don't remember that being in the book, so.
This brought memories of his Gilead graduation talk in 1975 when he had made clear his conviction that Christ Jesus had personally raised up Pastor Russell to carry out a special role. This material, 3 years later, indicated that he felt such personal individual selection by Christ was continuing in other cases, with the result that only a few select persons were raised up as special teachers for the congregation. There's a footnote to that. Carl Klein, on several occasions during governing body sessions, referred to Fred Franz as having been the oracle of the organization for many years. Though generally said with a smile, his repetitious use of the term implied more than mere jesting. The above suggested material bringing Russell into the picture was not used, however, and the information found on pages 99 to the top of 102 in the commentary on the letter of James is a replacement of Dunlap's material, which I wrote, so that President Franz's objections would be met. It was, in a certain sense, a refutation of his view, since Jesus' words at Matthew chapter 23, verse 8, "But you, do not you be called rabbi, for one is your teacher, whereas all you are brothers," seem to be completely contrary to the idea of a very small number of men forming a somewhat exclusive group of specially selected teachers, the chosen few. The rewrite I submitted was approved in committee and published.
Yeah.
So not for the first time, Ray Franz's comments, public comments,
Or not
are not published.
publicized, yeah. But I think it's a kind of strange thought anyways, because their whole program is to make everyone have to teach.
Yeah.
And whether you're qualified or not, you're sent out door to door to teach people.
Which brings up the issue we've dealt with in many videos before about the door-to-door ministry. How are you qualified to do this work? We've done videos on that. And how many teachers were there in the New Testament anyway? Because we've made the point that no, very few are teachers in the New Testament, but way more than Fred Franz would allow here. He can only name one, and that's himself, whereas in the New Testament, just from the writers of the New Testament, you have Matthew and John, who are of the 12. You have Paul, of course, writing about a quarter of the New Testament, and he's not even one of the 12. You have the writer of Hebrews, who we don't know, could be Silas, could be Apollos, several
Luke.
nominees. Luke, who is not an apostle, not a prophet, writes a quarter of the New Testament, and actually he writes even slightly more than Paul. And Mark, another one who's not an apostle nor a prophet.
You mentioned James, right?
James.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all the ones we know for sure that were teachers in the New Testament. But when Paul says he gave teachers in Ephesians 4, he doesn't just mean those guys. He's talking about on a local church level.
All the people leading the worship at the congregations.
Teaching in an official role in the local congregation. So he's not just talking about the guys at the top of this hypothetical pyramid that you're talking about here, Fred.
Mm-hmm.
So they're wrong on several counts. That, like you said, that people that he doesn't think are teachers are being sent door to door, whereas Ray and the governing body aren't going there.
Mm-hmm.
So are you qualified to teach or are you not? And apparently Fred is making the point that he considers himself the only official teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so does Carl Klein, another member of the governing body, the Oracle.
You know, the fact that he would kind of push down James and raise Russell up as an example, it almost sounded like a
Cult.
well, yeah, we don't know about James, you know. But Pastor Russell, we know he had good motives. And
Who appointed James? Well, his brother appeared to him. That's better than Russell and Fred.
yeah.
Okay, our link is a video I did, a kind of a testimony way back in our first year of shooting videos. How I left the Watchtower and landed softly, and the reason was, the difference was that I had read a lot already and therefore trusted many of the teachers of Christendom. Before that, I knew that they were clergymen of Christendom, whereas Vivian had not.
Mm-hmm.
So she had a very hard landing.
Yeah. Didn't recognize anybody as a teacher at that point for me. But you did.
Yeah, and that document, by the way, from which I'm reading in that video and its link, which is on at the end of it, that document is on onewonders.org in the PDF archive if you want to look it up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also an enormous playlist of some, 1,400 videos or something in the He Gave Teachers category, where we go through or advocate for the books of many of the people we've discovered who have blessed the church over the centuries.
Mm-hmm.
Check it out.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Bye.